Joining me now, I have former spokesperson for the Israeli government and retired IDF Colonel Miri Eisen, and also retired Navy Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for your time. Admiral Montgomery, if I could just start with you and pick up where Hannah just left off. Trump threatening Iran, saying if you close the Strait of Hormuz, we're going to hit you 20 times harder. He then goes on to say we will take out easily destroyable targets that will make it virtually impossible for Iran to ever be built back as a nation again. If they're so easily destroyable, why has that not already happened, you think?
So two things on this. One, I don't think Iran's actions are controlling the flow through the Straits of Hormuz right now. Right now, there is no flow happening because of the potential fear of Iranian either mining or missile or drone actions. So, the president's threatening Iran, but the actual thing holding back flow are the owners and operators of the ships, the insurers, and therefore we're bottlenecked. And in terms of destruction, I think we are on the U.S. and Israel is on a 4-week air campaign, probably hit about 10 to 12,000 targets and then reattack some of them. And we will destroy their ability to build missiles or drones now or in the future, maritime capabilities now or in the future, or a nuclear program now or in the future. So I think those things are going to happen in any case. Not that it's an idle threat, but he's kind of making clear what our intentions are over the next 4 weeks.
It's a good point the Admiral makes, because everything we've been hearing from here in the region is exactly in line with that the companies are making their own choice about the Strait of Hormuz. Understandably, I think most people would say, is many can even get insurance, as far as we understand, even though the costs have gone up, but they just don't think it's safe right now. Mir, if I can turn to Israel's side of this for a moment, we just had alerts about explosions being heard in Tehran, so the Israeli airstrikes seem to have resumed even at this hour. But there were questions brought up a few days ago about Israel's approach, especially striking the oil depots as aggressively as they had. Some of the United States, even Senator Lindsey Graham was surprised some were critical of that. What would you say about that strategy and whether it could have been perceived or even have been counterproductive to the war effort?
At the end of the day, we're talking about a terror military organization that what it needs is also mobility, and that mobility comes from oil depots. The oil depot specifically that the Israeli Air Force struck is one that supplies the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the different forces that you need at the end, both for the missiles, for the launchers. To move them, you need oil. We're not talking about having struck different oil reserves of the state of Iran. Here we're talking about the ones that specifically are part of those military targets. So I don't think that there's a change. I don't think that that's a difference. I think that Israel is looking at those military targets, which is what we've been doing all of the time from the beginning in this joint venture with the United States. And in the joint sense, we've been attacking a lot of the different military targets that are the missiles, the launchers, the R&D facilities, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and you can't stop at letting them have oil. They need that to be able to move all of those different capabilities, both for the drones and for the missiles and for the launchers.
Admiral, of course, a big question and concern for many is if we're about to send troops into Iran. One, do you see that happening? And if the U.S. were forced into ground operations, how different would this be from the wars that we've seen in Iraq or Afghanistan?
Well, first, I don't think that's going to happen. I think the president's pretty clear on that. I think there's not, as an air campaign, this doesn't have a majority of American support. If it became a ground campaign, it would be a killer issue for him politically. So I just don't think that's going to happen. If it did happen, I think we'd experience a lot of what we experienced in the past 20 years, which is that U.S. forces are not that welcome when on the ground in a Middle East adversary. So I'm hoping that he sticks to his word. This stays an air campaign. That doesn't mean special forces or intelligence forces don't make appearances to do specific items that can't be handled from the air. But that's not traditionally what we think of as boots on the ground.
I want to follow up one thing with you, Admiral Montgomery, that we were talking about on the Strait of Hormuz, if I can, in that, to your point about the ships and the companies making decisions, what would make their mind change? Are you in favor, by the way, of some sort of an escort, and could that happen soon, or is it a ways away?
So back in the beginning of my career, I did convoy operations through the Straits, and it's a very directed thing. I think we were probably 2 tankers or 1 tanker for 1 warship. If you do that, you can provide some level of protection. But I think if I were Admiral Cooper, the Central Command Commander, I would not recommend doing that until I've really set the conditions. That means a lot more destruction of drones, a lot more like re-rubblizing of the cruise missile and mine collection facilities of the Iranian Navy. So I know that there really is no significant threat. Once that's accomplished, then you can do a reasonable risk transit of ships. And I got to tell you, to back out 300 ships is months of work at this point, because I think there's about 300 ships backed up in the Arabian Gulf right now.
Miri, let me just give you the last word before we wrap things up here. Of course, President Trump has expressed disappointment in the choosing of the Ayatollah's son, Mujtaba, as the next supreme leader. What do you make of him in power? And is this just going to be continuation of the same that we've seen for the last 50 years?
I think that's why they chose him, because right now we're talking about the hardliners trying to show we are in control, and we're going to continue doing the same. They're not going to allow the other voices in the room. That doesn't mean that right now Khomeini's son is the one who's going to run anything. It's that very hardliner group around him. They are continuing to be attacked all of the time, and I think that we all need to realize that it isn't easy to change a regime. I so agree with the Admiral about boots on the ground. It isn't about boots on the ground. It's a country of 93 million people. And I would say that maybe half support that regime. So it's an uphill battle, but it's one that needs to be done, especially to get rid of all of these capabilities that they've been using against all of the world, because attacking all of the oil is attacking all of the world.
Miri Eisen, Admiral Mark Montgomery, thank you both for being here this morning. Greatly appreciate your time and insights.